Lunch with Lee was recorded at Hive Sound Studios, Sydney's newest podcast, recording and all audio hub. If you have any recording needs, go to their website, Hive Sound Studios. Hello and welcome to Lunch with Lee. I'm your host Shane Lee. Today, coming from Hive Studios here in Marnes Point. Today on the show, Michael Bevan, a former New South Wales and Australian cricketer, playing 18 tests and 232 one-day internationals for his country. He's arguably the greatest one-day player of all time, scoring 6,912 runs at 53.58 with 600s. His best bowling came in Test cricket, taking 6 for 82 and 10 wickets in a match against the West Indies. Post-cricket, he's been a coach, a mortgage broker and a masked singer. Hey, Bevo.
Thanks. Yeah, hey, mate, how are you? And my biggest achievement, of course, is knowing you for 36 years.
36 years? Can you believe that?
No, it's crazy.
Going quick, mate. Also on the show, Luke Maddison, a CEO and co-founder of Centauro Virtual Sales and Marketing Team, helping small and medium businesses drive increased revenue and sales with outsourced expertise. Away from work, Luke is a rugby league fanatic, playing junior rep footy as a kid and supports the North Sydney Bears. He's a foodie. He loves a pun. He's a good mate of mine. Welcome, Luke.
Thanks, Shane. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Now, I'm pretty excited. I've known you for a while, Luke, but Bevo, as you said, mate, 36 years. I think we first met at Campbelltown.
Yeah. Every now and again, stories crop up and people talk to me about Campbelltown, and I sort of struggle to recount and recall some of the players and the stories and the games we had there. But yeah, I'd say that's kind of where it all started.
Yeah, well, you started in Canberra. You went to the Cricket Academy in Adelaide. So then you played for South Australia. Then you came to New South Wales. You played for us for many years. You played for Australia, toured the world, and finished up in Tassie. And you've spent time in Yorkshire, and you played county cricket for Leicester as well, maybe?
Mate, I did the rounds of county cricket. I played for at least 3 counties, I reckon. And, because I played mostly one-day cricket, and that was the form where you required the least amount of time. It gave me the opportunity to sort of head across overseas and ply my trade there. And, of course, in those days, there wasn't a huge amount of money. And so so it was always an option. And, so I had a good long stint over in county cricket in a couple of states as well. And, being from Canberra, I never thought it'd sort of pan out like it did, but no, very happy, very happy.
And Luke, you co-founded Centauro, as I said at the start, and we'll talk about your business in a minute, but you spent a lot of time, you originally worked with Canon, but you spent some time in the UK as well, I think in North America.
Yeah, so I did a bit of a stint overseas, Shane, in my 20s. Most of my 20s, actually, I wasn't living here, which I guess is kind of the Aussie way to do things.
Crazy years.
Yeah, so I did a stint in Canada for the best part of a year, running a product launch. I was 22 and had no idea what I was doing, but it was good fun. And I'd never really travelled as a kid. I kind of grew up in a real working class kind of environment, so didn't really travel overseas or do a lot of that when I was young. So my first big trip was actually jumping on that work trip and flying to Toronto, Canada to live. So it was a bit of an experience, a bit of an eye-opener for me at 22, and I kind of went a little bit loose for a while there, I guess, and kind of ran amok a bit in Canada. But yeah, the UK was great. I did 4 years over there, and the best part of 4 years, and it sort of sets you up for life, I think. It sort of teaches you a lot of lessons. I came back at 26 and was a lot more mature than I might have been if I had stayed here.
And Bevo, how's the body? You mentioned all those teams you played for over all those years. How's the body? You still look pretty fit now?
Yeah, not great though. What did Junior say? I had the chassis of a Ferrari and a motor of a Mini Minor or something like that. Mate, I'd like to, once you hit 50, I like to keep reasonably fit, or at least be healthy, I suppose. So my deal is at the moment I sort of just eat as well as possible and begrudgingly take myself off to the gym 3 times a week, and there's very little motivation there, I've got to admit, but I do it in the name of sort of just trying to be healthy as I sort of get into my, after 50s at the very least. Yeah.
But the diet must be working, because last time I saw you were completely bald. Now you've got a beautiful locks of hair up there.
It's all natural, mate. It's all natural. I just rub some shampoo in and then it's all...
You've got to let everyone in on the secret.
Mate, thanks for noticing, because it's been a while now. Obviously... for those of you that follow my Instagram profile, they would have seen that I have had a hair transplant, which is kind of crazy because it happened very impromptuly and happened without much thought, to be fair. And so, yes, if you're recognising why I have a bit more hair since we've last seen each other, that's probably really the reason.
So who did it?
So it was a company called Eugenics in India.
Okay.
And obviously, as a cricketer, you have ties, have quite a lot of ties, and, you have your networks over there. So it was kind of the best place. And it all stemmed from, I was on holiday once, and last year, probably in about July, August, and I must have been bored, so I just put some hair with one of those hair apps on myself and thought, oh, that looks pretty good, actually. And so within 3 months, I'd had the operation done, because I'd always worn my hair pretty short, and it just got shorter and shorter, and I cut it shorter and shorter. And then I saw this photo, and I thought, oh, look, I'm happy to have a bit of a crack.
Where do they get the hair from? Is they get it from your back or your balls? Where do they get it from?
You thought it was looking a bit thick up there, didn't you?
Well, it's definitely not from Patrick Farhad's back, because that'd be a huge head of hair.
Yeah, he's not going to have any problems getting hair for his head if he wants to go down that route. Mate, it's a combination. I think they can use hair from wherever.
Okay.
In my case, they took it from the back and the sides. They took about 4,500 grafts or hairs or whatever you want to call it. Then I think they harvested about 1,000 from my beard.
Wow.
So in the middle, that's where all the sort of the beard hair is. So there's a little bit of a change through there. And I suppose they've just got to get enough for it to look dense or half decent or whatever you want to call it. But look, it's been near 10 months now for me.
Good. It's really good.
And it's, I'm pretty happy with
Yeah,
it.
it looks good, mate. It looks younger. I like it.
Yeah.
Mate, let's talk about Centauro. You
Sure.
co-founded that.
Yep.
It's an outsourced marketing business. So you focus on sort of small to medium businesses
Yeah.
that haven't either got the function or the capacity to have a full marketing communications team. So talk us through that and how people engage with someone like Centauro.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. So look, business started nearly 10 years ago now. So it's been a long journey in some ways, and then other times it feels like 10 minutes.
Yep.
Came out of the corporate world, and you mentioned I worked at places like Canon in the past, and sort of wasn't sure what to do. But I always thought there was this gap in the market around people really understanding their marketing plan and the strategy and then executing it properly. There's a lot of agencies out there that are digital agencies just doing things around Facebook, LinkedIn, Google. A lot of agencies now really focusing on digital, but this full service, being able to build a proper strategic plan and then executing it, my former co-founder and I thought that was sort of a bit of a gap. So Centauro, like you said, Shane, is all around, if you're a small to medium business, not too small, we're not working with little startups, but if you're a business, you're growing and you think, okay, now it's time to invest in some marketing, you've got a couple of choices. And generally the one that people go to the most is they'll go and hire a marketing person, but they're not from a marketing background themselves. So they're not obviously sure about what they're hiring or who they're hiring really, but they'll go spend some money on that. And then marketing's a much bigger function than they probably thought. Right? So that person might be skilled in some parts, but not others. So they might spend, say, 120, 130 on a headcount. They then find that person can't do all that work. So they then go out and talk to a bunch of agencies. They might get a content agency, a digital agency, what have you, to go and execute that plan. So that 130 they were going to spend jumps up quite rapidly. Right? So that goes up. So we sort of came up with the idea of saying, well, that's great, but why not get rid of that middleman of a person there and we can be your team and your agency rolled into one. And that's what Centauro was born from. So we do everything from a business plan up. So we do anything in the marketing space. And if it's something we don't do, like podcasting, Shane, we'll have a partner that can help you do it. So that's where the business started. It's grown pretty dramatically since then. We have a really great team, headquarters here in Sydney and another office in Melbourne. And it's something that I've sort of a passion project for me, right? I've really thrown myself into it in the last 10 years. And, for clients, for us, it's really anyone that's, sort of more than 2 million turnover and up, really. And we've got a really wide range of clients in lots of sectors.
Yeah, well, speaking to a few of your clients, like Referoo, you've been there on the journey. Like their business is now thriving, like Bevo's hair. Due to the fact of your team. And as you said, you have a diverse set of experienced people within the business that can fulfill all types of the things that you need.
We've tried to keep it all in Australia as well. So we've got a very small team overseas for some of the design elements. But all the marketers that you work with in our team, or any of the people that your account managers and the leaders of those teams, are all here in Australia, and they're experienced in various marketing fields. So it's been really useful for us to have that experience, because we're not trying to offshore your work or trying to do it cheap. We're not the cheapest agency, and we don't intend to be. But the work that we do is incredibly high quality. And we sort of start with that question of who's your client and why do they buy from you? I think a lot of marketers have kind of forgotten their job is to really understand not only the client, but the business that they're working with. So we really try and understand their goals, what they're trying to achieve, who's their client, why they buy from them. Start there. then build our plan out from that. We don't try and shove them into a specific digital channel or a specific type of marketing. Each plan's tailored to that client. So you mentioned Referoo, they're a long-term client of ours and a very successful client at that. And we were there from when it was the original two starters, the two founders, and they had sort of same thing. They were going to get into this marketing sort of caper, but we're not sure how to do it. And now we've been there, over 5 years. So it's been I think a fruitful relationship for both of us. And I've actually got a different role in there now as their fractional CMO as well. So it's been a long-term partnership, and that's sort of our average tenure of clients. Shane's nudging 5 years. So we tend to get them and they stick, which is something we're proud of.
A lot of that would ring true to you, Bevo, because you were very analytical, weren't you? And I always, when people ask, what was Michael Bevan like? You were a guy that you weren't afraid of having the awkward talk or the talk you needed to have. You confronted things head on, which made you, as I said at the start, arguably one of the best one-day players in the world. We'll talk about your tests in a minute, because I think you could be one of the best test players if you give more opportunity. But you were very analytical, weren't you? And you were very hard on yourself.
Oh, overly hard, and I realised that throughout the course of my career. And I suppose I'm an analytical observer by nature. And so the sort of the team thing for me, the social events and the team dinners, and that was the toughest part for me, because the small talk and all those types of things didn't really interest me that much. I like a nice, robust, interesting conversation, about goals or why things happen, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I mean, that was part of my game. Particularly one-day game, analysing the situation and the circumstance, and then sort of coming up with the right plan. And so not really dealing with clients, but dealing with a method or approach that you need to implement that'll sort of go direct, the quickest way to find a solution. And the solution needs to be pretty simplistic and within your capabilities. And so, And at the time, I didn't really understand my approach. It's only since I've sort of stopped playing where I've had to sort of go back and say, okay, well, this is why I did well, this is why I didn't do well. And particularly if you're trying to coach someone, because you can't tell them this is what I did. You've got to be able to say, right, look, what, take the principles that you used and put them in sort of conceptual terms, and then sort of marry the two, I suppose. So, I think that's entirely fair summation that I was an analytical guy, for sure.
Now, that 1996 versus the West Indies, when you hit the winning runs, mate, that shits me. You know why? I played that game and I got a duck. And that's played every weekend, I reckon, on Fox Sports. And my mates ring up and go, we saw you better getting another duck. So thanks, Bevo.
Well, thank you for letting me back.
That's right. Look, if I would have got 4, you would have been so famous.
Exactly. The legacy would have been never eventuated.
But take us to that point. I'm sure you've been asked this question many times, but I'm sure our listeners would love to hear it. But what goes through your head? Because you were a guy that, as I said, was pretty analytical. You work out what bowlers had to go, how many balls, and you weren't scared to take it right down to the end.
No, because, that was part of my job. I felt batting at number 6. I mean, and of course, they bowl, your targets that you come up with in your mind where you think you can take them down or take them for a boundary. I mean, they might not crop up to the 47th over or the 49th over. And so how do you sort of justify why you would make an early run if it doesn't fit your strengths, or if it's the wrong option for you, or it's more risky? And so, I definitely, at the start of every innings, I would have bowlers that you would think could target, and depending on the wicket conditions, or depending on the match situation or the field placement. So sometimes you might target a bowler, but they might not give you the right field placement. So if you're sort of taking all those things into account, you sort of, I used to sort of just come up with, right, now's the right time. And if it was at the end, so be it. And you had to make peace with yourself. You had to be able to say, right, if I lose the match, or if I'm here and the match is lost, well, I've got to wear that. But it's kind of amazing how often you're there at the end and you end up manufacturing a win.
You tore shreds off me, and I learned a lot from this. There was a game we played in the Gabba. I got 100, but we were 9 down, and I got out with 7 short. And you said, you can't do that, mate. You fucking got to be there at the end. There's no point. And I learned a lot from that. I thought, at the time, geez, you've been harsh on me. But you're dead right, because if I'm not there, we don't win anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's right. And how many times do you see teams that just nearly get there and you think you're there and then you just relax for a second and then you're cooked? But, yeah, look, it was like in that particular match, like we were 4 down, 5 down, 6 down for not many runs. I forget the exact, but... And quite often when you're going in those situations, there's actually no pressure on you, because everyone else has had a bit of a shocker or they've got out and no one's really expecting you to win. And so what I found in one-day cricket is that, you know, there were times where you put pressure on yourself, or there were times where it felt like there was more pressure, but that wasn't wasn't one of those times when you came in that situation. It wasn't till you had a chance of losing or someone could take away that win. So you had to get back into the game first before those nerves started to kick in, because you had nothing at that point.
Pressure goes back on them. It's a great sporting moment, mate. Do you have a favourite sporting moment that when you're growing up?
Oh, geez, yeah. Well, Bevo hitting that 4.
Yeah,
I remember I was about 16, I think, at the time, or 15. I remember it well. Yeah, probably heaps. The one that's going to be in the future, Shane, is when the Mighty Bears come back as the Western Bears in Perth. I'll cry for a month when that happens.
Do you reckon they will?
Oh, well, yeah. Peter V'landys thinks he's pretty close to it, I think, and I think they've rescued the original bid and talking to the WA government now. And I think, from what I read, the NRL's going to own the team initially, which is probably a smart thing. And look, as long as it's red and black and got the Bears logo, I'll be on board.
Yeah.
But I've already talked to a couple of my business mates. I think we'll definitely get a box for the first game. It'll be a bit of fun. But the greatest thing it's probably live. There's probably 2, Shane, that stand out to me. One, when we won Origin again after not winning it for many, many years. I was lucky enough to be in the stadium and right in front of where Trent Hodgkinson scored that try. And then probably the greatest one when I was in Canada. I was living in Canada and I went to the ice hockey for the first time, the NHL.
Wow.
And it was a grudge match for Toronto. I didn't realise how obsessed they were in Toronto with hockey. There's all these other sports there, but no one gives a shit. It's just hockey. And they were playing Montreal, which was their least, or their most biggest rival. I hate them. And they had this little hotel awning coming out of where the Montreal players were skating out. I said, what's that for? And they said, well, it's tradition for us to throw beers at them and food at them and hit them with things. So they get there was the passion and the noise and the music. And because it's American, they just do hype so well. That was I remember I was probably 22 and I was like, holy shit, this is amazing.
And that was in the lead up to the
game.
game.
And then when they start, and then they're like, oh, this guy's going to fight. And I was like, oh, really? And then next thing you know, he's banging, he's out, he's dropped it. I was like, how good is this? It's like legalised violence. It was good fun. So I remember that and thinking, geez, the Americans know how to do it well. But yeah.
Do you remember, I think it was after the West Indies where our ground got invaded and Steve Waugh had to hit 3 off the last ball, and by the time he got back for the second, the stumps were already gone by the crowd. And then we were in New Zealand, and I think you got hit by a salmon on a fish, a full salmon.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I've been hit by a beer can. I've been hit by a salmon. Actually, the salmon was a near miss, and I don't know if it was a salmon, but it was a beautiful specimen, and it was frozen. And I just heard this. Yeah, it was just frozen. I heard this thud next to me fielding on the boundary at Eden Park.
I saw it from fine leg.
Oh, and don't they give it to you at Eden Park? So you have things being thrown at you, lollies mostly, and I remember Booney having batteries thrown at him in Pakistan, and so, and it just got this thud and just had a quick look and I thought, holy shit. Yeah.
And, I thought it might have been you throwing it, Shane, after your feedback. Not too happy with Bevo's feedback.
Well, maybe I thought you said, you thought someone hit you with a baseball bat, and I said no. I think it was a salmon that got you. And Steve Waugh said to me, "Are you pissed or something? What are you talking about?" But it was a protest. Apparently, I read the papers the next day. Some Australian company were poisoning the waters off New Zealand. It was killing the salmon farming industry. So
that was your fault, Bevo.
Yeah. No, I get that. You know, I'm here just trying to eke out a few runs and get my singles under pressure, and I'm under a barrage.
A fish, that's good.
Yeah, Bevo, talk me through your. I was really keen to get your analysis on this, but your Test career. When you first played for South Australia, you scored 600s in a row. You took on some of the best fast bowlers in the country. Your first tour to Pakistan, unfortunately, Foxtel wasn't around then. I think you averaged over 60 against Wasim Akram, Waqar Yunus, and Mushtaq Ahmed as well. The thing people don't realise, you replaced Alan Border from memory. So you replaced The Rock. Did you think, and Bob Simpson as a coach, did you think you had to change the way you batted? Because you're a free spirit. And would you, and you got done with that one short ball, which everyone said you can't play it, and that was absolute bullshit. You could.
Well, I could, but the problem that the sort of after going through that whole situation and finally sort of getting some clarity around it and some honesty was that I didn't think I could.
Right.
And so wow. Even though I had played the short ball really well previous to that really well and found a way to play it pretty well in first class cricket, I suppose I found it a little bit different that it was on the back page of the papers and that you had hundreds of thousands of people behind you and then people were commentating. So it wasn't really the short ball per se. It was the fact that people thought I did and I didn't have a strong enough resilience in my mind to be able to turn around and say, well, look, I've played this really well in the past. I don't need to change it. It was one time. And so if anything that could have been called at that point in time, I probably viewed it in a pessimistic way and in a pessimistic fashion. And as you mentioned, I had a good series in Pakistan, had a good series against West Indies in Test cricket, did well in first-class cricket. So for me, it was kind of like a version of the yips that the golfers get, and it was probably a loss of confidence or a pessimistic way I viewed it that cost me a lot of time and worry and hours, trying to play the short ball and never really quite making peace with it. And I didn't think that situation would crop up in my career, to be fair. And so at the time I couldn't really rationalise it or understand what I was going through. And so it ended up being sort of a confidence thing as opposed to a technical thing or a skill
thing. Definitely was a skill or a technical thing. No. And I didn't realise that till probably about halfway through my career, where I went back to first class cricket, worked on the short ball technique wise for hours and hours and hours, only to get back to Test cricket for the same thing to happen. So for me, I kind of learnt a lot about myself, my confidence levels, and as you mentioned at the start of the podcast, in terms of being hard on myself, I used to put a lot of pressure on myself to play it perfectly, and rather than giving myself a break. And so, sort of by the time I'd figured all this out, that it was probably more about me than the cricket. I was 27. I was halfway through my career. I'd had a couple of cracks, and the Australian team at the time was very strong. So I just, was probably never going to get another shot or a crack at it. And so the thing that I had to resign myself to was that I just needed to improve as a player in first class cricket to justify to myself or to show myself that I'd got a handle on what I'd been through, which I feel as though I did, It's interesting, like say, once you retire, you have fresh eyes almost. And did you see that in business? You go into businesses, and I'm not saying Bevo suffered from analysis paralysis, but you could overthink things definitely in sport. Do you see that in business? Yeah, definitely. I think the funny thing is that you often, a business owner, like being a business owner and starting your own company, it's terrifying. Right? You're talking about pressure there, Bevo, and what it does to you. It's the same in business. Sometimes you can overthink everything, and particularly when it's your business, you tend to get very much. It's your life. I often think of Centauro as a child. It's like this kind of thing that's attached to me and has become sort of part of me, and and you can get to that point where you get very, very myopic on something that you probably should have just let go. And we find that even with just dealing with businesses that we work with, they're often. We're dealing with an owner or a founder, and they've got that passion attached to it, right? It's their baby, and you'll often find that there's two types of owners. I've tend to find the ones that are really open to learning from that, and they're the ones you really want to work with because they're like, hey, it's not my skill, keen to learn, or the ones that have just got that vision in their head and they're stuck on it. And your job half the time is to try and get them to go, okay, that's great. I really understand where you're trying to go with that, but if you thought of it for something else, and it's certainly in my career, and I never played high-level sport or anything like that, but certainly for in business, that pressure thing, Bevo, really resonates with me because I feel it all the time. And when you're having a bad run, or maybe the results aren't going the way you want it to, or there's just a lot piling in on you,
it's a pretty lonely place at times, and I can imagine it's the same standing in the middle trying to get your form back when it's not happening for you.
But as you said, there are lots of different roles in a small business that you've got to sort of plug the gaps, and that would be equivalent to a cricketer trying to plug an opening batsman spot, a middle order, a lower end, or a spinning, or so a small business for a person starting out must be incredibly tough and arguably more difficult than being a cricketer.
I'll tell you about pressure. Pressure was rooming with you, Bevo, because you didn't sleep very well, and I used to like to probably relax a little bit more before the game. I'd go and have a few beers and go for a bite.
You and everyone else in the world.
We've got
Bevo again. We've got Bevo again.
But I remember, don't wake me up, you said, and I snuck in one night, and I thought I got in. I've obviously tripped over, and I got in the bed next to you, and then I just heard out of the corner of my ear this sort of, I thought, what is he doing over there? And you were doing sit-ups. I'd woken you up. Thank God you were doing sit-ups.
Well, the thing is,
I was wondering where you were going with that, but anyway.
Every time you get an interview or you do something, everyone says, who was the worst roomie? And it was always me. I was always the worst roomie. So I apologise to everyone out there who I ever roomed with. But obviously at the start of our careers, we had to share, and then as it got a bit more professional, we got our own rooms, and everyone had a collective sigh of relief.
So was Shane actually the worst person you roomed with, Bevo, or was it worse than that?
Mate, everyone was bad because
That's so funny.
and particularly at the start of my career or our careers, like early 90s, you're still coming out of the old school era. Guys are still going out and having a few beers at night.
Yeah.
You could have a kind of a decent solid night, have a few drinks, come back at 11 or 12 or something like that and still be ready to play. But mate, I was so full on, I was back by 10, 9 or 10. I wasn't a big drinker. And so, basically anyone who was late night or a smoker or whatever was always going to be incompatible with me as a roomie.
I reckon Greg Matthews was probably the best because you never saw him. He went straight from the nightclub to the ground.
But then didn't he have a sleep from he finished the game, slept from 6 till 11 and then went out till 3 or 4 or something like that.
Still got 6 wickets the next day. There you go.
I mentioned at the start, Bevo, you went on The Masked Singer. You've always had a great voice. And we were sort of at the start of Six and Out, by the way, 25 years this year. And they're doing a documentary on us on Fox, which is great. And McDonald's are going to use us in their national ad campaign this year.
Oh, wow.
Get the band back together.
Yeah.
But we had to use another guy called Richard Cheekway instead of you. But was your mum an opera singer?
No, I don't. I don't think she was. She's got a great voice. Okay. And when you look at the sort of the talent side of things, you could argue that a lot of the sporting talent has come from that side of the family. But I always watched you guys from afar, and it wasn't sort of my gig to be the lead singer. And Cheeks, I was listening because I know Cheeks started out, and then I was listening to him. Years later, he really improved as a singer. He
sings really well now. Yeah. He's a good frontman too, Cheeks. Yeah. But I remember 96 we went to India and you wanted to learn the bass and I took the guitar over. Slats had a guitar and we went around. Cricket Australia flew us to get to India. We had to go via England. It was like about a 5-day trip to get all the way over there and you carried this big bass over there, and you asked me to tune it. I'd never tuned a bass before, and I remember I broke the top string, and you looked at me like, where the fuck am I going to get a bass string from in India?
Mate, those things are heavy, mate. They're 20, 30 kilos. And didn't I have to, or Slats had to play it or something while I was playing the bass, because we had two guitars, bass, but then someone played my bass, but it was Slats' turn. Did he turn it around?
It upside down, Jimi Hendrix.
Something like that. Yeah, so, I remember that. That was... that was an interesting experience.
Fun. Do you still play the bass now?
No, it just lasted for that too.
Still missing a top string, apparently. Yeah.
Any music in your family, Luke?
No, I don't mind to sing myself, but it's usually after a few drinks and it's by myself. So I'm not sure. It's not sure that I'm a musician there. No musical talent. Just stick to business, I think.
But I was saying at the start, I saw a really interesting thing on social media the other day. They're talking about revenue in a company, and they're using a leg of ham as an example of it. And they cut a small slither off that leg of ham, and that was the marketing budget. People don't give marketing enough credit, do they?
It can be maligned at times. It's probably a nice way of putting it, Shane. It's sometimes I think marketing has kind of morphed over the last sort of 15 or 20 years. It went from very much like an advertising kind of feel content and really old school type of marketing to now it's very data driven. It's almost like a science in some ways. It gets quite analytical. But if you're talking about clients and the way they approach marketing, they often have sort of champagne tastes and beer budget. They're trying to work their way up to getting leads in the door, and they often underestimate what it's going to take to do that. It's not just the lead itself; it's everything you need to wrap around that. I tend to find that the budget, yes, is important, but it's really sort of that comment I sort of said earlier in the show, Shane, around understanding who your client is, and I'm still stunned to this day, and I'm not just talking about small businesses here, but large businesses, corporates. The lack of understanding of who your client is and what they want from you is massive. And we tend to find that when we come into some businesses, you'll get them in a room and you'll get them talking about their client, and they'll often have the owners and some of their senior people arguing about who's our client, why do they buy from us, and you get a lot of feedback back from clients saying, hey, that was great because it actually cleared up the way we think about it. So the budget, yes, is important. Look, it's a pay-to-play world these days in digital advertising. Often, it's competitive. So, with Google having such a monopoly as an example, it's really, your budget is important, but it's how you spend it, and that differs by client. But really, for me, it's really understanding your own business and understanding your client, and that's still something that we really drill into our clients. It's something I think we do very well, but it's a real gap for mine in business today. A lot of people, if you say to them, who's your client, they'll go on a long-winded story, or they'll say everyone with a pulse or something in between. But they haven't got that clear understanding. And if you get that part right, and you really know who that person is, or that business is that you're going after,
it's a lot easier to target.
It'll set the framework for the remainder of your program.
Well, I'm going to start a marketing campaign right now because Cricket Australia are about to, I hear in the coming months, name the one-day competition after someone. It has to be the Michael Bevan Cup.
We're going to vote now, I think, Shane.
Mate, listeners, please, you've got to follow this. I think, Bevo, I played in 5 winning teams for New South Wales, so you've played in at least that. I think you won one with Tassie as well. You've played in 3 World Cups. You've won 2 World Cups. We talked about the 4. Sure, it's got to be the Michael Bevan Cup, doesn't it? It's hard for you to answer. I know.
No, it's very easy for me to answer. And it depends who votes on it. But look, I'm not really sure. I mean, because the thing is that, I always loved my first-class cricket, loved playing for New South Wales. I loved the experience. It was always a challenge, but it was also interrupted to a certain degree with going off playing one-day cricket for Australia. So, in terms of how they're going to choose and who they're going to choose, so I think it's the other guys are Dino, is it?
Dean
Dino
Jones,
and Simo?
Yeah, Simo, yep.
Simo, I think they've sort of drilled it down to the two.
Obviously, 2 great players, but I don't think anyone's had more of an effect on one-day cricket how it was played than yourself. That's my opinion.
Well, I mean, I think in all honesty, probably Dino did it to begin with, batting at number 3 there for Australia, and he was obviously one of my heroes and our hero in terms of the way he approached one-day cricket, and and then. So, maybe in the sense of finishing matches, and then Dino in terms of starting.
Yeah, well, Dino was great for Australia, but I think you really dominated too at the domestic level. So that's my opinion, mate.
Yeah, well, thanks, mate.
You're welcome.
I appreciate
I've already
it.
hit favourites on me.
Yeah, we're voting, yes.
Sign up.
Now, I'll ask everyone that comes on the show. I'll ask you first, Luke. A young boy or girl wants to go into the world of marketing or sales. What advice would you give them?
Geez, it's how long you got. Look, I think, and Shane, you and I talked about this before, but for me, the big thing is your attitude. You've got to have the right attitude. And if you're going into the business world, whatever career it is or whatever it is you want to do, the ones that are successful, the ones that say, okay, I'm going to come in, I'm going to do that graft, I'm going to learn, I'm really going to immerse myself in this and have a red hot crack. So I do a little bit of work with young business people where I do the mentoring thing with them. And that's what I tell them. I said, you've got to get your attitude right because that's what you bring. That's what you bring. And if you don't bring that part, you're kind of stuffed before you begin. And the second thing I think is you've got to learn to be resilient. You're going to get knocked around a lot. Right? And it's the same in sport for you boys, and the same in your professional career of whatever it is you're doing. You've got to be prepared to take the hard knocks. I remember I listened to a speech Tom Brady did about that, the sports parallel, and he was saying that, they asked him, there was a question he got from the audience that said, you're one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, probably the most successful quarterback, but you weren't the most talented. So how did you get ahead? And he said those things. He said attitude, resilience, and just hard work. He goes, since the dawn of human time, that hasn't changed. And that sort of resonated with me. And something I often say to young business people, if you're not prepared to do those hard yards, particularly early when you're learning, you're never going to make it at all because you're not going to dedicate yourself to it. If you want it to be a part-time a part of your life, then that's probably where it'll stay. There's some very naturally talented people, and they might be able to fluke their way through it, but hard work beats talent every time. So, that if you're prepared to have the right attitude, work hard and be resilient, I think that's the starting
It's great
point.
advice. And I think you've got to be prepared to adapt and change too. I think if you look at, I heard the other day that a young boy or girl now who finishes school, they'll probably have 5 to 6 different careers over their lifespan of their working years. So you need to be able to change and adapt with the way that the world's changing. Bevo, a young boy or girl wants to become a professional sportsman. What advice?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, all of those things that sort of Luke mentioned too, there's probably a step before that too, and it really has to resonate in terms of a desire or a need or a want. And I'm pretty big on that. Like, lots of people do different things in their life. Some learn to become good at something and learn to adapt, and then others sort of find their space or their niche or something that fills them with, the ability to be challenged but simultaneously have enjoyment. And so for me, I'd really encourage people to find that thing in their life, or the skill or their interest or something that captures their imagination and their attention, and something that really resonates with sort of their needs and desires. And so that, and if that happened to be cricket or sport, then I think that's fair enough. And so sort of leveraging and understanding your strengths and what you can provide is always a nice way to go about it.
Having
as well,
that open
in addition
mind.
to those.
An open mind, Bevo. You talk about knowing your strengths and learning from it. I think that's a really good point, because you mentioned the 5 or 6 careers, Shane, that people are going to go through, and you're right. And something I see with young business people now is they sort of take that one knock, something and it's generally something they've got to learn from tenure or experience. That one knock, and they'll fold. They'll be like, I'm going to leave this job. I'm going to go. I don't like that. And it's like, that's where you learn. So you learn by putting yourself into a situation where you're uncomfortable. And good point around passion too. You've got to be passionate for whatever it is you do, but I think that comes in your attitude. If you want it enough, you'll bring that right attitude. You'll be ready to own it, and I think that's important.
Well, I definitely learnt. I learnt not to wake up Michael Bevan when you're rooming with him. You'll start doing sit-ups all night. Hey, I want to thank you both for coming on Lunch with Lee.
Thank you, Shane.
I'm going to make good on that now, Bevo, and buy you some lunch, mate. So
thanks, mate. Appreciate
your time.
Thanks, Shane. Thank you.
No worries.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Luke. That's it for Lunch with Lee this week. A big thank you goes out to our guests, Michael Bevan and Luke Maddison. Thanks to our sponsors, Hive Studios here at McMahon's Point, Richard Bowman & Co, Taylor and Clothiers, and the Brain for Life charity. Make sure you hit follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. Do us a favour, hit 5 stars. And if you're there and you're passionate, please leave a review. And come find us on Instagram at I'm at Lunch with Lee. Our official Lunch with Lee photography was done by Felicity Kelly. You can find her on Instagram at Felicity Kelly Portraits. And once again, thanks to our producer, Dan McHugh. We'll be back next time for some more cracking episodes on Lunch with Lee. We'll see you then.